Hey, Mikey, isn't it time for your favorite radio show?
Yes, Jeffy. I totally forgot. Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, Season 2, Episode 2. The only thing that could drag Jeffy and Mikey away from the soft glow of electric sex in the window would be talking about the world building in A Christmas Story.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back, a deranged Easter Bunny. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And tickled pink like fuzzy feet on that suit. I am Michael Miller.
And yes, for those of you who
oh my God,
when this episode goes live, this is not yet Christmas season.
Not even close. And my wife was like, why are you guys doing this now? She's like, shouldn't you guys be doing this in a couple of months?
There are a couple reasons. One, I think this really encapsulates one of my premise ideas for, my rethinking of world building, which is children are world builders and we lose it over time. And Christmas Story is just a great example of that. Even though it's an adult talking about a child or his childhood, but I always thought it did a great job of showing the child's mind.
Did you get to rewatch it before?
No.
See, now this kills me because I didn't get to rewatch it either. But I've seen this movie hundreds of times. My wife and I watch it every year, and we sometimes watch it more than
multiple
once.
Times.
Yeah. So
it is one of my favorite top Christmas movies of all time. I'm from Indiana. And my father, when he grew up, was much around the time Ralphie was growing up.
Really?
Yes.
So does he have a soft spot in his heart for this movie too?
So I started watching this at a very young age. And it's been a family tradition of mine since well before I got married. So back from the dark ages, basically, for those of you who are young kids today.
And
yeah.
Keep going. I want to look something up real quick here.
So I have no idea actually when it even came out.
That's what I was looking up.
I started watching this on TV with my parents. I don't remember. I don't think we even saw it in the theater, but there's a huge connection because it's very Indiana.
1983, it was released. So it's ironic because it was such an authentic period piece that it even the way it was filmed looks like it's older than 83.
Yeah, and it's like it attaches to my father who lived in Indiana around the time it was supposedly made in a very similar town. I believe it was actually filmed in the town my dad was born in.
Really?
Yeah. And, for me being a Hoosier, it's very authentic Indiana. The joke, if you've ever watched the Bob and Tom show, it's in Indiana, it's always 1959, which isn't quite true, but it kind of is too. Mm-hmm. But really, it's just like, I always saw myself in Ralphie.
Yeah.
I was that kind of kid who had the really crazy imagination where I could get lost in huge threads, and I still do.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I get lost in huge threads of imagination. And so it appeals to me on so many levels. And I think in a way it's better to have not watched it right before, because for those of us where it's been a tradition, it's larger than the movie itself. And, it's this ongoing thing, this cycle that happens every year. So the scenes kind of all flow into each other. So it's really about the moments, and it's about the specific things. But the other thing that got me to think about this was my wife actually got an email from from a major retailer talking about Christmas already. So especially the women, at least, are starting to get targeted with Christmas ads. They're saying it's because of the COVID that people just are looking for any excuse to think of non-COVID
and something positive
election type of thoughts. And so people are jumping to Christmas. even though they're still doing Halloween, but
Like we haven't, we're still more than a month out from Halloween, let alone Thanksgiving.
Issues,
well, of course, that makes sense.
Planners are going to be getting their presents even earlier this year.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to Black Friday, probably most Christmas shopping will be done this year.
My mom would actually start Christmas shopping the day after Christmas because everything would go on sale and she would buy.
This is traditionally?
Yeah. Everything that would get knocked down big time. So she would buy that stuff for the following year.
Which is real cocky because kids change so much year.
She would not like toys. She would buy like supplies, wrapping paper. She would buy evergreen gifts, things that she knew if it was like, a kind of gift that you could give to almost anybody, she would have a little stockpile of stuff so that if
here's
something
the neat one that happened for us, it made my mom's life easier, and I'm going to leave it this way for all of the kids listening. Santa Claus he would give my mom the wrapping paper leftovers every year so she could have wrapping paper for next Christmas Eve. It was very nice of Santa.
That is nice of Santa. That's clever of your mom.
Yes, that way we could never figure it out and admit it,
I still think my all-time favorite like Christmas cheat move is Jim Six, who is a good friend of the show. We've talked about him before. When he was a kid, he would not sneak around the house trying to find hidden Christmas presents. Mm-hmm. He would just look at his parents' receipts.
That's Jim, man.
How genius is that, though? So he always knew what he was getting because he would look at their receipts because they would have them by their wallets or whatever on the night table or the desk or wherever they kept them. And he would look and say, what has mom and dad been purchasing? Okay, I know I'm getting a PlayStation this year.
when my wife and I first got married, it was funny. We went back and forth because my family was very big in the tradition that you don't know what your Christmas presents are ahead of Christmas.
Yeah.
And Kristen, she I think her closest cousin / sibling was her brother, who I think is 13 years older than her. Mm-hmm. And then I think the next generation of kids after her and her family was like 9 years younger than her.
So she was very much in the middle.
So for 9 years, she was like, really spoiled because she was the only baby. And up until around the time she was, 10 or 11, something like that, when her cousin was born, she had the attention of everyone, all of her aunts and uncles, and they used to like all go camping together. So she was spoiled rotten, but she always knew what her presents were. And so she would tease me like it's like, she's like, I'll know from what stores you go to what you're getting me. And I told her where I was putting her presents, and I told her what my mom told me is like, the presents are here. If I find you going in here, I'm going to give them to charity. There was a huge battle back and forth when we were younger about that. And I'd actually take cash out to go Christmas shopping, just to make sure that I could surprise her.
So the receipt move wouldn't be, so she couldn't track the package or whatever.
She could track, kind of figure out by the cost what she was getting by the store and cost. So, fun days, even though at this, years ago, we kind of decided the experience of just enjoying the season together kind of was more important. So, but that's being older and married, I guess. You got to have your fun in different ways as you grow together.
Anyway, but this episode is not about Christmas.
It's not about Christmas. It sure sounds like it. So
it is about world building.
Yeah. And so just very basically, we want to review a brief synopsis. If you've not seen this movie yet, we don't know how that's possible.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even considered someone might not have seen this movie.
It's, I believe, on 24 hours a day, every Christmas Eve, I believe. Yep.
There's a lot of people out there who are not Christian and thus don't gravitate towards Christmas stories.
But it's hard to miss the movie.
True.
It is very much a piece of Americana. If you're not American, it's probably, I would assume, not something that you would even know of. But maybe, because Hollywood does have its tendrils all over the world. And it's funny. It's a good way of making fun of Americans too. Indiana's good for that. But the basic synopsis, it's a simple story. It's a kid who wants a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas, and what lengths he will go to get it. But through it, you see the imagination of the kid as the world around him, helps him through this journey.
It also, I mean, for me, it's kind of funny that you even describe it that way, because I would not describe the movie that way. For me,
you give us your summary.
Well, my summary is that it's about the modest living, lower middle income household during the holidays. So it's about, it's about family. It's about, an American family, and obviously a boy, but not just about him trying to get this one thing that he wants for Christmas, but also his entire world. I mean, we get to see his school, his friends, his home, a lot of his home life. We get to see some of the stuff that his, parents deal with, and the whole holiday season. So for me, it's not just about the gun. For me, you said a moment ago that it's a movie about moments, which is true. Like it is definitely a movie filled with moments, but I like to think of it more as a movie filled with vignettes, and I don't mean just the cutaway vignettes that Ralphie creates.
Explain that to people like
that we're going to talk about, but I mean I'm going to say sequence, not scene, because some scenes some sequences are more than one scene where they're dealing with a thing. The whole movie is like miniature story, miniature story, miniature story, miniature story. Like you think about, the flagpole bit, or the bunny suit, or the lamp, or the BB gun, or the school, or the Santa. Like every one of these is a big interaction, and almost feels like it's its own thing. And they're bigger than just a moment. You know what I mean? Course. So that's
the
how
idea is like Michael says, I have to rhythm it away. It's like, my thing is a very simplistic overview summary of the plot, because ultimately the story you learn in his drive for the BB gun, which is, it's the glue that holds the vignettes together. It's sort of like the cutscenes in a Monty Python episode. They seem strange, but it somehow ties the episode together. But the thing is, the BB gun theme ties it together, but the ultimate lesson really is that it's not about anyone present. It's about the time you get to spend with your family, and your friends. And that's really what it is, in a place and time where life was simple enough that there wasn't a lot of distractions. If you did something like that set today, there's so many additional distractions that would interrupt from it. It would be hard to get to the point, which is, even with all of the distractions in life, family and friends are what matter. And
I also feel like that movie, and like especially at the end where the movie's from 1983. We think everyone has seen it, so it was okay if I do a little spoiler. So at the end, when he gets what he desires, it's almost like because the movie has a voiceover. It's narrated throughout the entirety of the movie
by the adult version,
by the adult version of the main character. And also, I'm sure you know this, but for the listeners, if you're not aware, the guy who's narrating the movie is the man who wrote the book.
I didn't realize it was actually the guy who wrote
It's actually him. So there's some extra.
He had great voice work too.
He had a great voice, and also there's a personal touch, because it's literally this is literally Ralphie.
No wonder he got the character so well.
Exactly, like he crushed it, because he's the one who wrote the book. The book then became the movie, and there's actually 2 movies. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I did not know
there is a sequel where Ralphie is an adult. I forget the name of it. It might be A Summer Story, or something like that. It was not as popular.
Was it enjoyable?
I've never seen it.
Okay, so you don't know either.
I don't know, other than like I've read reviews and I've looked up little things on it. I don't have access to it, so I may get it at some point just to see. Yeah. And it's not the same actor playing.
Oh, it's not the kid grown up as an adult?
No. I can't remember if it's him a little bit older or if it's him as an adult. I don't remember. I'll have to look that up, but that's not important to us for today. But I was on a point. What was I just talking about before we got into that?
I have no clue.
I totally lost my train of thought. I was on a point. So he gets what he desires. And it seems to me at the close of the movie, it's almost like he's encapsulating his entire childhood in this story. And like, that's where his childhood ended, where that was the last real bastion of him being a child because he's on the cusp, right? Like
That's right.
he's not quite ready to be a teenager, but he's very close to that.
He's close to that. And
he's close to that preteen age where, if you ask me, that's when you stop world building.
At the end of it, he's at his height. He's at the height most children reach, and then most kids at that point
start to taper off. Yeah, they might
and then people
start
like
to notice girls.
We don't.
No, we did not. If anything, I escalated at that point.
I know. Yeah, and that's where you really get into the weirder fantasy stuff.
Well, that's when I started discovering tabletop.
Exactly.
You know, started getting into D&D.
But that's the age where, at least back, even when we were still kids, and I don't know, it might not be true today, but when we were kids, probably like, you know, even when my wife was a kid, for young people like that, you know,
for young people like that, there's a bit of an age gap between Jeff and his wife. For you, those of you that don't know,
but essentially, anyone who started before the internet became constantly connected to you, I can't say that the world is the same place since that's happened.
It's definitely
not good or bad. It's just the world's different.
It's just different.
It's kind of like when they started writing words down. It's that much different because we're connected differently, and there's a lot more distractions because of that. But before that was the age where you became a geek, or you started to grow up, become a young adult. You know, and smart people became geeks, and there's everyone else. But you know. The biggest thing is, you know, I want to point out is all of these sets, you know, Michael talks about, you know, it's like, and some of them are more obvious, like in the BB gun thread, when he gets the BB gun at the end, he's out in his backyard and he's playing guns against himself, which is very much something I would have done as a kid. I did do this as a kid. You know, it would be those moments in Christmas. You have the toy and your kids are all at home and your friends are all at home. They have got their toys. But you have to go out in your backyard and play with your new, I never got a BB gun. My mom was in the you'll shoot your eye out camp.
Yeah, my mom too.
But I would have had like a Nerf gun, and then I shoot my sister with it, and she'd be like, "See, you'd shoot your sister." I'm like, I'm gonna shoot my sister because I can.
Yeah, because this is a Nerf gun, right?
It was a battle I just could not win. So I joined the army. That taught her. But you know, the thing is, you know, it was like he had this whole world he created there where there was, I think it was like Black Bart and his bandit gang was attacking his family and he was fending them off. But it was this little miniature world that he developed to play out with this toy of his. And that's kind of really, you know, and we talked about this was step 4 in the previous episode, you know, the social play part. Even when it's by yourself, you can still socially play. That's your imaginary friends, but this is kind of the height of that, you know, where it's completely fictional characters, you know. It's like, and I actually earlier today, we bought our son a recycling truck from Walmart. We were buying some stuff. We had recently purchased a motorhome. And so we were at Walmart.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way. You say that so casually, but it's such a significant thing. It's a huge investment, and it's something that's been a dream of yours and your wife's for a while. And I'm so happy for you guys. Yes. I really want to acknowledge that. Like, they bought a motorhome. They're going to be traveling across the country.
Yes. And it's like, especially now with COVID, it's like we will not fly on airplanes. And that's how we always traveled. And so it's like now we can travel with our kid. We can go out and see my parents, you know, who live in Missouri, which is, you know, probably 16 hours from here at least, you know, go down to Florida, look at places where we want to move someday. But, you know, make sure that we can enjoy life now, because especially during COVID, it's easy to forget that. But back to Ralphie here. The thing is, we bought my son this garbage truck. It's like a recycling truck. It has a little grab arm like the newer ones, and there's like you can push to it like the trash cans, and you can lift it up. You can dump it on the hopper. He knows all the parts from the Blippi garbage truck song.
He's got a song for that too.
He's got a song for that, you know, and it's like this is the cab, and like in the video, it's like there's a cab, there's a guy Tony in there. The action figure that came with it is now called Tony,
of course, because
that's the name of the guy in the cab from the video. There's the hopper, which is where the grabber arm grabs the trash can and pulls it up into the hopper. My kid knows all of the parts of this thing because of the song, but he now plays with it and is creating games with this, influenced by the Blippi video, but they're becoming his own, you know. But that's the social play starting. That's the beginning. But at the end, you know, the height of kids' social play is probably when you're about 10 years old. You know, puberty destroys all. It's not your parents, it's your hormones. Your life will change at that point. As everyone who's listening here probably knows. But that's the height of your social play, and that's kind of where it ends up going into something that's truly a more sophisticated world building, or it tapers off. And you still use it, but it's in ways that you learn how to become an engineer or a computer programmer or an electrician. You apply the same skills, you just maybe not quite as overtly or as silly. Hopefully not when you're learning about power, but it's the same skill set. But yes, he is the ultimate world builder, and it's those scenes that we love. The leg lamp, and just the idea of the electric sex, will live with me forever.
So let's get into a little bit of like where he does these. I kind of want to throw some interpretation
into real world building scenes from there.
Some of his world building scenes, but also we talked about in the prior episode when we were talking about how when you world build as a child, you're doing it to basically explain the world around you, or to understand, or like you don't have science yet, so you're trying to I can't remember all of the things. I don't have the 5 steps memorized. So like, let's just pick one. Like in the first one, I think we see it's the Black Bart scene.
So that's step 4. That's the social play step.
So he imagines getting the BB gun, and he creates himself as a hero in a scenario where his family is being attacked by this group of bandits that have come into the backyard. And I love that they're relegated to the backyard, right? I mean,
like this is the place that they would choose to attack.
This is where they would invade. But see, now as someone who knows a bit about filmmaking, I see that as a practical delivery, because for them to shoot a whole bunch of sequences where they're all around the house, and he's going window to window. I mean, you would do that in like an action movie, but that would have taken a lot more time. But where we really only have like 3 or 4 camera angles, and it's great because it's all it's all kind of Ralphie's perspective, because it shows him at the window, and then it shows the view from if you were looking out onto the backyard from the kitchen window, right? So
and the privacy fence, so you can hide a whole bunch of stuff just on the other side of it for filming.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I want to ask, and I want you to go on this little exploratory journey with me, is why. So why is Ralphie putting himself in the hero role? And I'm going to throw some of my spin on it, but like I think it's.
Then I'll correct you. Go ahead.
Okay, fine. So as a guy, as you get older, there's the whole bit of like you want to step into the role of your father. You want to become the protector of your family. You want to become the man of the house. Yeah. And in this vignette, that's exactly what he's doing. His father's cowering under the table with his mother, and he is the one that his father...
He's taking over the role.
Right. And his father is like, oh, he's a dead shot, isn't he? And he's like, well, it's Black Bart. His
dad is proud of him.
And his father is looking to him for strength and security.
Oh, crap. I think you might have got this one right.
So I see that. And also where obviously in this type of fantasy in the movie, because there's other ones where it's different, but in this type of one, like in the schoolhouse, he is filled with confidence and comfort. Right. He feels strong and confident in himself and his abilities.
The thread of the BB gun, which is more than that scene, because there's scenes where it's like his teacher's the big bad witch and from the Wizard of Oz, and his or maybe his mom. His mom was a clown, I think.
His mom was a jester. The teacher was the witch.
But the idea is this whole way, that story is the hero's journey. There's no Merlin in there.
Well, I mean,
Merlin
Santa?
might be the narrator. I'm not sure. But it typically is a minimalist version of the hero's journey. And at the end, he gets the gun. He saves the day, which is what happens at the end of a hero's journey, which, especially if you're a kid back then, all the mythology about guys is this thing. And really, what does it do? It helps show a man your path to becoming a man, which is where you can take care of your family. You can do all of the things necessary. And so you have to be able to supplant your father. Not really, but you have to have those same skills to be able to supplant your father. But that's really what the hero's journey teaches people, is you need some guidance from people who've come before you to become the man you need to become to lead the life you need to lead. And so the hero's journey is the mythology that we use, not just in the West, but I think, it's very similar. I'd imagine in the East, there's very similar story types I've seen, and I'm definitely not familiar with storytelling out there. But the basic idea is the same. Is mythologies teach us how to act, and that is one older than time. And it makes so much sense that the centerpiece of this is this kid who's at that pivotal point of his life, and he's learning the ultimate lesson, which is it's not really about the toys. It's really it's to me. I'm probably overthinking it and making it overly brilliant. But it takes the entire journey of you as a young man, or the way you're trained in modern U.S. society, or at least up until recently we're trained that way. This is the journey you're on, and it's the hero's journey. That's what you try and live for. It might not be as glorious as becoming the hero who saves the day from the bandit. It's just maybe one that teaches you how to take care of your family by earning enough money so that they can live a better life.
You've gone on this wonderful tangent, but what I was,
it's all your fault.
But it is my fault, and I'll take it. But what I was trying to point out is that the why in the motivation of Ralphie and what he's exploring in himself by making this. By world building there, by him making this vignette in his brain about what's occurring around him, is that whole explaining the world around him and trying to make sense of it. So like, if I get this BB gun, I will be the strong, confident person I want to be. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
It will get me to where I want to go.
It'll get me to where I want to be. So that's what I was trying to get to. I love where
it ultimately ends up to you and your family sitting down, eating Christmas duck.
Chinese turkey.
Chinese turkey. I'm sorry.
Chinese turkey.
Which is Christmas duck.
Which is Christmas duck.
I missed the noun. That's the thing to remember here. Ultimately, when you go back and watch it, it's the nouns of the world building. Black Bart, the Red Rider.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
The Christmas turkey. The tapestry,
the tapestry of obscenity.
Yes, exactly. Those are the things that made this. It's each of those threads where it's one world. Some are worlds within worlds, but it's the nouns. That was the world building that Ralphie was doing actively during the story, and then the author did when he was creating the work. Like this fictionalized version of Indiana, which is stereotypically true.
Do you have another one that you want to do the way I just did? I want to pick one and talk about the why and the build, or do you want to move on to our next?
No. I think that was good enough.
Okay.
I mean, we could spend all day doing this, and maybe we'll.
And why not?
But ultimately, I want to kind of get to two different stories in our lives. One from mine and one from Michael's, which were world building that affected us as kids.
Okay.
And kind of just a bit of a story about it. And I'll go first because Michael doesn't really understand what we're doing here because I haven't explained it. So when I was a kid, there was a monster in our basement called Harry. And so this thing terrified me when I was a young kid, like pre-kindergarten. I was afraid to go into the basement by myself, especially if the lights were out. And then, of course, my sister who created Harry. And really, it was probably her effort to stop her slightly younger brother from following her around everywhere and annoying her.
Or possibly falling down the stairs. Was it a finished basement or was it a?
It was an unfinished basement.
Okay, so is it
space?
So is it possible that it was a danger thing there, maybe, or no?
Well, it played into it, but the darkness, it was chilly, so the temperature was radically different when you would go downstairs than the rest of the house. It had a crawl space too, which was sort of like going into the cave. I mean, there were real things that kind of played into it, My imagination really probably helped my sister drive this one home, plus my age. You're susceptible, to what people tell you when you're young. And like I said, part of it was her way of trying to get me to stop bugging her. But then when I would annoy her, she realized it was a weapon she could use over me as well too. Like, don't make me go get Harry. and stuff like that. Or I'm going to take you to the basement and leave you for Harry.
That's an older sibling thing, no doubt.
That's an older to younger sibling game, right? And so, and this is something that me and my sister are, she's one of my closest, dearest friends, so I'm in no way upset with her. Don't take it that way. This is just kids being kids kind of stuff. But the thing was, there was this whole world in my brain of this actual, if you've read any modern kids literature, there's the Gruffalo, which maybe I'll try and put a link of if I can remember here.
That sounds so familiar, but I don't know that I remember.
I don't know how
is.
new or old this is. This is a popular book from the UK. A friend of ours from a mastermind that I belong to, Helen, gave this book to our son. And it is a brilliant kids book called The Gruffalo. So if you have a young kid, probably not super young, but like once they get just past their panel books, this is like a good first book or whatever. But it's the story of a mouse who's walking through a forest. He makes up the Gruffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the story, the Gruffalo ends up being real, and he has to deal with the thing that he created. And then there's but it's a great story, and he uses it to survive. But it's just a wonderful story. But the idea is Harry was my Gruffalo. He was this monster that I built up. My sister did very little, but my imagination started creating nouns, giving him the knobby knees and the purple spinally backs and the black wart on the nose. These were all things that got added in by my imagination.
Are you being specific, or do you just making that up on the fly?
Gruffalo now.
Okay.
But in my brain, that was built up as this big, horrible monster with yellow glowing eyes, and but it was fleshed out by me, but it was fed to by my sister, but it really became my own creation, and which probably for her became like she probably didn't understand why it even worked at all, for me, so for my favorite fond childhood memory game, that was that one, and the fear of going to the basement.
Mine is different, and I don't know that I'm quite I don't know that it's funny because we talked about this before we started the show, and I was asking Jeff if my example was quite what he was shooting for, and I was like, I don't think this is quite right, and I was about to say something, and Jeff interrupted me before I completed my thought, and he goes, well, what you're trying here for is something where you're creating, where you're doing a little world building. You're creating, what did you say? I know the second part of what you said, but what was the first part of what you said?
You're creating games.
You're creating games. You said it's something where you're creating games or a game, and where you're creating a story. And what I was in the middle of saying when he cut me off was, well, what we had created was a simple tag style game, but we applied a narrative.
Yeah. It was a tag plus, right? Yeah,
it was a tag plus. So, and I'm pretty sure my brother created most of it. We all kind of, I feel, added something to the rules, but none of the rules were added just as, oh, we need a rule. Like, we created the narrative around it. Mm-hmm. So the game was called Werewolf, and you have to understand that we lived remotely in town. We lived on the edge of town, like far away from on my street, there were 5 houses. On my street,
and what town were you from? Were you from
Summers? Summers, yeah. So on my street, there were only 5 houses. I mean, there were houses way further down the road, but where we were, there was only the 5 houses.
And in Connecticut terms, Summers is not a larger city at all.
It's a small farming town, but there's still plenty of people in it.
Yeah,
but the point is that we were on the outskirts of town, so there just weren't a lot of houses up there. So as far as having neighbor kids to play with, we only had one. It was me, my brother, my sister, and my neighbor Nathan. And they had other kids, but they were older. And there was another kid down the street, again, older. And there were a couple of kids that lived
8th graders,
like a few neighborhoods away, that would occasionally ride their bikes into our neighborhood. So we would sometimes play with them occasionally. Or if we had friends over for a sleepover, because we'd only play this game at night. We'd only play this game after the sun went down, in the light of the in the light of the lamppost in the front yard, which was not, it was the only light source. So it wasn't a great deal of light, so you could run out into the darkness of the yard. But this was the game. It was called Werewolf, and you had one person who was the werewolf. And if they tagged you, then you were dead. And that was it. But we were like, well, the people who are being chased should have a little agency as well. So the people who are being chased are hunters. And if they tag the werewolf, then the werewolf's been shot by a silver bullet. And then the game is over. And then that hunter who killed the werewolf gets to be the werewolf in the following game.
Okay.
So if the werewolf tags all of the hunters, then the werewolf wins, and that person can be, the werewolf again. But it's hard to do that because it's like, 3 to or 4 to 1, or depending if we had a couple of friends
odds are
over, it might
against
be. Yeah, odds are against you. But if if occasionally we had like a few people over, then it might be a like 5-6 person game, which was a big game. And I don't remember, we modified the rules later to add the idea of ghosts because we didn't want a person sitting and not playing for a very long time. So if you were a hunter and got tagged by the werewolf, you became a ghost. And there was some mechanic that we allowed them to be reincarnated, come back into the game and become a hunter again. Or it might have been they became a ghost and the werewolf could choose to have that ghost become a new werewolf. And then there were 2 werewolves. I think there was something like that going on. I don't remember. But the point is that each role in the game, i.e., if you break it down to a simple tag, you have, the tagger and the person being chased, the chasee, and that's all you really have as a relationship. It's very simple. I touch you, and your role in the game changes. That's it. But we've created this whole story narrative where everyone has a role to play as a character, in the game. So we would just be running around in the dark, tagging each other, and you're the ghost now, you're the hunter, you're the werewolf, whatever. So
awesome.
And we loved playing that game. But I mean, I don't know what, because there's certainly tons of freeze tag, television tag.
Yeah.
There were so many tag games.
My family did a zombie one. It's like I got back from the service. My sister was going through a divorce, so she moved out to Connecticut for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like my younger sister's oldest, Aiden, was born, Aiden, and then my older sister's kids were all out there, and so me being the cool uncle with no kids, I would be out in the yard playing with them. Ours was called zombie butt whackers. And I used a pool noodle and I would whack them and then they would become zombies if I whacked them. And there were like limits of how far they could go away from me. And the beautiful thing was I could walk around. I was starting to get a little older at the point. So I was like, I couldn't run around like I was a kid anymore, but they could.
So you leveled the playing field by saying,
so I leveled the playing field. And I couldn't run because I was the zombie, but they had ways to fight back against me.
Did they get a pool noodle?
I believe so. I believe it was, pretty much when I played, it was violence all around. So, that was so funny. The years later when my, one of my cousins became Uncle Lulu for his, he got the same title I got. He was the Uncle Lulu for his, brother's kids.
What is the Uncle Lulu?
I was called Uncle Lulu.
Why?
So,
what is that? Is that a title?
It was a title given to me by my niece.
Okay.
So essentially, it was based off of old Looney Tunes line.
Okay.
And it was the one with Jack and the Beanstalk, and the giant falls down, and he's like, "Watch out for the first step. It's a Lulu." And so it was one of the times I was in the service, I was back, and I
don't remember this.
They were all chasing me, my nephews and nieces, and I was just kind of I was using their momentum against them, and I was tossing the ground, and I yelled, "Watch out for the first step. It's a Lulu." And my niece, being a little girl, stood up, threw her hands on her hips, looked at me and said, "Nuh-uh,
you're
Uncle
Lulu.
Jeff, you're a Lulu." And then I became Uncle Lulu ever since then. But then years later, when my oldest nephew had his first kid, they actually called me to find out if I would be offended if his brother was called Uncle Lulu, which to me that's the ultimate compliment. So of course, but and I technically became Lulu the Great, and I could use the royal we moving forward.
Lulu the Great.
So
love it.
Just as the rhyme, and going back to Christmas Story, this kind of ties it back into Christmas Story. Ultimately, it comes down to love them or hate them, it's your family and friends who are with you your whole life, So keep them close. If you have to have a Chinese turkey, go for it. But, especially I think COVID might be a thing to remind us about this too, Ultimately, it's the time we spend with people is the most important, It's nice to play games with people online. It's nice to follow people on social, but ultimately sitting down and getting to talk to people and sharing the stories is just a better way of living. So, but the world building task here is I need you to think back to the world building you did as a child. Spend some time to think about it and go, what were some of the games you thought, were the ones that today are your favorite, or maybe they were your favorite back then, because those aren't always the same games. We'll be creating a thread on Wednesday in the undercroft where you can share yours. So,
and that would be the real world task. To share your best stories with friends and family on the undercroft. And and if you notice from the last episode, we're kind of trying to get you guys to focus a little on your previous mindset, your child's mind. We want you to get in touch with that, because that's going to help the world building if you haven't picked up on the theme.
Yes. So we hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, Jeffy.
Bye, Mikey. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.